Hey, gang! Welcome to Dentists in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. As always, it is live. It's been that kind of a day because the bourbon has been brought out tonight. You always know what kind of a mood Jeffrey's in based on what he's drinking on the table, but I'll stop talking about myself in the third person right now, and let's get on with Dentists in the Know. I am really excited about our guest tonight. She kind of laid a lot of the groundwork for what many of us are now able to do. She started her own dental podcast, the Dental Digest podcast, and I'm just so excited to talk to Dr. Melissa Seibert. She's just going to be a lot of fun. I met her for a few minutes before the show. You guys are in for an amazing show. But getting back to us for a second, you know what we do. We are all dentists, we are all educators, and we are all business owners. And our job is to bring all of you in the know to the best of our ability. And so with that, I want to bring on my co-host, Dr. Jennifer Bell and Dr. Chad Duplantis, some of my besties in the entire world, and no one I'd rather be going through this lovely little career we call dentistry with other than these two. Well, as I said, guys, we have a fantastic guest, and I'm really excited to have her on just because, it really excites me when we get to meet the people who have really laid the groundwork for a lot of the things that many of us are doing in social media and in podcasting and in education. And honestly, we are talking with a true maverick today, and I'm really excited to have her on. JB, thanks for bringing Dr. Seibert on, and we'll get to her really soon. But do you have any news for us? Because it's been a pretty active news cycle.
It really has, but I was trying to look. Has anybody heard an update on Aspen? Are they back online? They were down for a while. In fact, I had a friend who practices close to one. They were getting a ton of calls for patients who...
Wait, who doesn't practice close to one?
That's true. But that's right. With 1,000 or more locations.
Yeah.
So I was curious if they were back online or not, because that was a pretty substantial hit as data started coming out more and more. Like, they weren't just attacked, they were locked out of everything for an extended period of time. So their offices were closed, not indefinitely, but definitely didn't have a timeline in which they would be reopening. So haven't heard an update if they're back online or not. So anyway.
Yeah, did you hear that? They weren't closed indefinitely, but they were not definitely opening.
I did hear myself say it.
Yeah.
So, if one... Listen. I was just going to say, as part of the educational experience of this show, I've now provided you the educational opportunity on how to use indefinitely and definitely in one sentence in one breath.
Yes, you did.
Right.
You did. Yes.
And now on with the news.
And now on with the news.
It's only getting worse from here, folks, because we're drinking. It's a happy hour. We've been working all day. It only goes downhill.
Hey, Jeff, I'm not definitely going to go downstairs, but I'm indefinitely going to go downstairs.
I'm indefinitely perplexed.
Yes. Okay. I'm definitely going to let JB go on with the news. Are you?
Definitely.
I appreciate the vote of confidence. I definitely do. All right, let's get on with it. This one I'm actually really excited about, and I tend to be a little bit middle of the road when it comes to legislative issues. And I'm sure that there's some secret sauce in this bill as well, as there always is when we're talking about the government. But this is actually something that I've been working on pretty intensely in our practice for the last couple of years, very focused in the last 6 months. The topic is the idea or understanding of non-covered dental services. So if you're a dentist in network and you do veneers, for example, and the insurance doesn't cover veneers, a lot of times the patient will get an EOB that states that you are required to take the write-off even though it's a non-covered service. Well, 45 different states now have enacted laws that state that if a service is not a covered benefit, then the dentist is free to charge their usual and customary fee. That's a big win. Still 5 states out there operating without any legislation. There's a few caveats to that particular piece of legislation, or those nuances within the state laws and the way that the insurance companies are interpreting it. Let's dive in. Number one, insurance companies often will say, well, it's a covered benefit, just not covered in this particular instance. So they skirt around the non-covered benefit rule, which we've interpreted now, and there's pretty good legislative data behind it to say that is a non-payment. So getting away from the terminology of non-covered and using the term non-payment of services, regardless of whether it would be covered in 1,000 of your other plans. You didn't pay for the service, therefore we're allowed to charge what our usual and customary fee would be. Okay. The other nuance is that large corporations that are self-funded and also any government-related programming, so any insurance companies that are being funded or managed through the government, do not have to abide by this rule. They follow under a federal umbrella, which protects them from these individual state legislations. Well, this week, a bill was introduced by both Manchin and Kramer from North Dakota to start to dive in and see if we can address the non-covered benefit services piece of dental and optometry insurance companies. So there's a huge push to move this legislation forward so that we now have a federal rule that protects all 50 states, but also actually impacts all of those insured, where right now you're having to figure out as an in-network provider, well, is this one that falls under a federal plan or a self-funded plan versus a traditional PPO local regional plan? Good luck. We hired experts. I've talked to Greg Grabmeier, who was on our show, who's an excellent knowledge person on excellent knowledge person. Wow, that's super intelligent, incredibly knowledgeable about ADA coding and coding rules and ethics. And even he would admit this is a very nuanced piece of the legislation. So happy to see it moving forward. I will disclose the fact that it is large. It is part of a large bill called Doc Access Act, which that then makes me slightly skeptical because I'm sure there's a bunch of other junk in this particular bill. And we probably need to dive into that a little bit more. And I'll definitely do my homework. But at least at the outset, on the outside of looking at this new legislation, I'm excited about the fact that maybe finally we can have a cohesive answer about how to manage and handle these to both the benefit of the patient and the practitioner. So stay tuned for that. Another interesting piece of news that came out this week and is particularly interesting because the guest that we have on tonight is serving in the military currently as a dentist. There were 65 dentists and doctors as a group that are serving currently in the Navy. They were under some assumption about when their retirement would kick in. There is the rule after 20 years of service, you're eligible for full retirement benefit. A record-keeping error in what their start service date was has now impacted 65 different doctors and dentists, respectively. Which is now going to add an additional 3 years of service for them to be eligible for full benefit. Obviously, that's a big kink in the system, an error that is very difficult to rectify. And, 3 more years in the military is a big commitment for individuals who have already served a long term. But anyway, that's currently what's going on there. The last piece of news that we will talk about tonight, we touched on this a little bit a few months ago, but there's a lot more traction coming forward, and that is the Dentist and Dental Hygienist Compact. Actually, oddly enough, this also originally came out of the Department of Defense and in conjunction with the American Dental Hygiene Association, the American Dental Association, and the Association of Dental Support Organizations to try to come up with a better system to help. Specifically, it was intended for spouses of our military when they get reassigned or relocated to different bases. Those that had professional licensure in the state that they were currently working in had a difficult, challenging, expensive, task of getting relicensed in new states. And if they were being moved frequently, this became quite a hardship and burden for the spouses. So that was the original intent of the compact. There's a lot of growing momentum for the compact currently. There are several states that have already joined, and many more have it up for discussion to be voted on. And so it'll be interesting to see how we kind of move towards a licensure portability. I think ultimately this will not be isolated to just spouses of military. I think there's a lot of momentum and pressure for this to be a portability across states for all professional licensees. So we'll see how this continues to evolve over time and how states decide to participate in that compact. But we'll keep you up to date. But it is an active process that's happening in many states currently. And with that, that's the news. Been a fan for quite some time of hers and kind of watching what she's doing in the social media platform and with her own podcast. Had a couple brushes with her, but never got to formally meet her in person when we were all in Chicago. Our paths kind of kept intermingling along. And then we finally connected, oddly enough, on Instagram. So I don't know if that's like saying how much we suck at interpersonal communication. But at least we finally got together, and we've had really great interaction since then. So I'm really excited to have her on. As Jeff said before, it's important to highlight and show what other people are doing in the podcasting arena and continuing to bring really quality individuals to the forefront so that guests can learn more about techniques, and hers is incredibly clinically driven. It's a very different kind of format, but
Thank you for that, by the way. I'm just going to interrupt and say thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I haven't said this yet, but we like to think of ourselves as the after hours CE event. So Melissa's really providing the CE continuing education, like the deep dive, and we're in the happy hour afterwards, kind of processing, bringing it down a bit in a more informal setting so that we can also see the sides of the educators that make them human and relatable and really validate and verify a lot of the content they're bringing forth. So I think these are incredibly compatible formats as we work together to bring these fantastic individuals in the dental industry to the forefront. Melissa has also been recognized as top 40 dentist under 40. Her dental podcast has received numerous awards, including most educational podcast in general dentistry, which I would be over the moon about. That is a phenomenal achievement for her. She's also currently serving in the Air Force for our military. Great education and very knowledgeable about adhesive dentistries and dental materials. I can't wait to dive in a little bit more on that as well. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome Dr. Melissa Seibert to the podcast.
Welcome.
Hey, that was the most gracious opening. So thank you guys so much for having me. I wish my show was nearly as fun as you guys, but we're much more technical. You guys have awesome energy. It's a lot of fun to be here. So thank you.
If you want me to cut that and you can just play it at your next speaking engagement or whatever, like kind of warm the audience up a little bit, we can do that.
And how do I become a top dentist under 40? Is that something I can shoot for right now, or have I blown that?
Call on me. I think you have to be under 40. That would be the starting point.
Oh, it's a technicality. Yeah. I got you.
That is indefinitely not gonna happen.
You could do under 60, under
really?
70.
Okay.
Still practicing under 80. That's a whole different category.
Yeah. Able to hold the handpiece still?
Yeah.
I'll join that category. Melissa, thank you for what you're doing. Honestly, when I said that, I couldn't, we talk so much about how things have changed in medicine and dentistry and generationally and what we've seen happen in CE. It really, I don't want this to sound in any way condescending, but it makes me so proud to see people value education and quality dentistry the way that you do and want to bring it to other people. And that's what warms my heart. That's what I want to see in the next generation of dentists that are out there being spokespeople for our profession. So thank you. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Thanks, guys. That means a lot. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about your journey, dental school, how you got where you are, decision to join the military and serve there. What was the birth process of the podcast and how all that evolved? I think our audience would really love to know. It's MTV behind the story, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. So my story is a little bit unique. Ever since I was 5, I wanted to be a dentist. Someone came into my kindergarten class. They just seemed super awesome. I wanted to be a dentist. But the family business for me was the military. My mom and dad both went to the Naval Academy. My grandfather grew up dirt floor poor, West Virginia, kind of broke out of that by enlisting in the Navy. Both my uncles were Marines. And so even before that, that was what I really wanted to do. I think, we'd go to Naval Academy football games, and I was just so proud, just filled with so much pride to see the midshipmen walk in. And I was like, I want to do that someday. And so in high school, I was guns ablaze toward being in the Navy and going to the Naval Academy. But my senior year of high school, when things got really serious and it was time to make a decision, my dad was like, you want to be in the Air Force, you want to go to the Air Force Academy. And I did not at the time. And in fact, he filled out part of my initial application because you have to apply to apply. And I was so mad at him for this. But then I went to the Air Force Academy, and that's where I graduated from. And I'm grateful for that. That was I wouldn't say fun college experience, but I mean, that was just incredible. When all of your friends from high school, are at frat parties, your face is in the dirt with a rifle, falling under barbed wire. True story. You're getting tear gassed. But it's really neat the kind of person you become through the process. And so the Air Force Academy allowed 2 to 3 people from each class to go into dentistry. And somehow magically I got one of those spots. So I did a 4-year HBSP scholarship. And I went to the University of Louisville for dental school. By the way, you'll know if someone's from Kentucky if they call it Louisville. If they ever say Louisville, they're not from Kentucky.
That's right.
Exactly. Like there's marbles in your mouth.
Do you say Warsh?
No, I don't. I'm not that fancy, but
okay.
But yeah, so then from there I did a 4-year HBSB. I think, and by the way, I just want to disclaimer with this housekeeping item, anything that I say is not intended to be reflective or endorsed by the Air Force. These are my views. But so after I graduated dental school, I did by the way, I've got some feedback. Is that coming from me?
Let me mute just to see.
Hold on. I think I know where it's coming from. Keep going.
So then from there, I basically went and did a 1-year AGD with the Air Force at Barksdale Air Force Base. I know a lot of people, and this is just my view, a lot of people want to join the military because they want to travel and they want to see the world, but I think they're missing an opportunity. You can get a phenomenal education. So I did a 1-year AGD with the Air Force at Barksdale Air Force Base, exceptional training. You do complex third-molar exodontia, IV sedation, CAD/CAM dentistry, perio surgeries, implants, you name it. And so I really enjoyed that experience, and I was like, I'd like some more training. So I practiced for 2 years at Goodfellow Air Force Base, which was phenomenal. Got a lot of experience there. But then from there, I did a really weird route, which is really only in the Air Force you can do this route, where I then did 2 more years of an AGD to become like a very comprehensive dentist. And I'm about to graduate that program. Grateful for the training. It's time for me to graduate, though. I got to get out of Dodge. But so it's, I think,
South Carolina.
Yeah, come work with you.
Just saying.
So that's my story. That's my journey.
So I want to back up for just a second because you kind of you directly, but you didn't know I was going to ask the question. Very rare for us to hear of people that went to a service academy that become dentists. And did I hear you say that they allow, like you have to like basically apply to say, I want to follow the path of becoming a dentist? Otherwise, you go through your Air Force, you go through your serving, and then you got to decide, well, I want to do this all over again?
It's true.
Wow.
Ultimately, you do owe a service time. One career profession that I think is actually super dope is being an aircraft maintainer. So that's pretty cool. You basically oversee all of these people. It's really cool. It's a really exciting mission. I was like, if I don't do dentistry, I think I want to do that. Yeah, because basically, ultimately, you owe a commitment. So no matter what, you'll be doing something in the Air Force, and the Air Force can't have everybody and their brother be a dentist. We only need
Sure.
so many dentists. So it's kind of trying to fit it through the eye of a needle, trying to get that spot.
Is that the same for the other service academies as well, or do you know?
So I actually also did a semester exchange at West Point, and while I was there, they actually didn't even have any dental slots, unless I'm mistaken. They might have changed. I think the Naval Academy also didn't either. I could be wrong about that though.
Wow. Very cool. I mean, that's impressive. So, you know, as I told you before the show, one of my biggest regrets is not serving. So thank you for your service. Thank you for becoming a dentist and, you know, serving our country. But how cool is that? That sounds like a really incredible journey. And, you know, especially where you're at right now. And you also said your husband's an anesthesiologist and he's a civilian. So I got to ask, where'd you meet him?
So he went to the medical school at Louisville. I went to the dental school. At the time, we didn't know each other, but we're good Catholics. And after Mass, we go to the evening Mass. So it's customary you go have a drink with your friends afterwards. And we happen to have mutual friends, and they kind of set us up. I'm very forward. I ask for things I want. He's more shy. So honestly, our initial date was more so me kind of like prompting him, like, you know, we should really get a drink together. And now we're married.
I love it.
That's cool. Very, very cool.
I was kind of hoping for a little bit more of a Top Gun story, just a little bit more, but
I was thinking he was
like
like
a bar, I think.
Bleach or something, or
Right.
you know, his name's Maverick. I don't know. Yeah.
JB, when does Brian come in with your drinks? Like, when does he come in and
Y'all, he's in Miami. I'm solo parenting and solo
bringing you your
podcasting,
drinks.
basically. I know.
Damn,
I know. I had to bring my own stuff down.
Damn Brian.
Brian. Damn it, Brian.
Damn it, Brian.
Hopefully he's
Damn it,
watching from
Brian.
afar to see that he's being shamed.
So switching gears, what are your passions in dentistry? I mean, what right now is top of your list for things that just excite you in dentistry?
Okay, so are we kind of talking about what are my interests in dentistry?
Yes.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, indefinitely.
I know. Super, super, like, that could have been interpreted in so many different ways. Well, okay, one thing, I am very passionate, of course, of like high quality dental education, which is kind of this for the podcast. But this is super weird because when I was in dental school, one of the classes I skipped the most was dental materials. I mean, that was a box for me to check. But now I'm fascinated with dental materials. That is my interest.
I hear you.
Yeah. And like elucidating that, and perhaps because I feel like a lot of dentists, they you know, it's like in dental school you learn the theory, but it doesn't really help you because you show up to your practice and you don't really understand what adhesive you're using. You don't, do I air dry it? Do I not? Like, can I use this all together? Do I need edge? So dental materials are one of my many interests, but I think I'm very passionate, so I have a lot of interest in dentistry.
It's funny that you say that. I was thinking this exact thought the other day. Okay, so there's a post in another forum, and somebody asks about air abrading zirconia. Okay, yes. And somebody goes, you know, a younger dentist says, "Wait, am I supposed to be air abrading zirconia restorations?" And another dentist chimes in and says, "I don't air abrade the restorations. You know, that's just dentists trying to complicate things. And I've had no issues over the past few years." And I'm like, I don't know that it's a matter of complicating things. I think it's just kind of following the scientific evidence that you're supposed to be air abrading these restorations. I don't know.
Who has time for evidence when what I've watched for the last week?
And so, you know, I've become this biomaterials nerd. So I'm totally with you because you're trying to being where Jeff and Jennifer and you and I are all at, you've got to be somewhat non-condescending, but you've also got to be like, you want to be passionate about it too. So you've got to merge those two things together. But I love biomaterials. It's so fascinating.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting that you say that with zirconia. So theoretically, if you're just luting it like a PFM, as I'm sure you're aware, you theoretically don't have to air particle braid it. And let me know if we're going too technical, because it's like,
no.
you guys have great energy, and I'm like, I'm bringing the vibe down.
No, you're
No,
not.
it is
Polycrystalline
not.
ceramic.
This is what we do, is we kind of marry science and what we need to all know with fun. That's our vibe, is like, we want to geek out, but we want to geek out and have fun doing it. That's it. We're all geeks. Like, that's, we admit that.
Let's talk about air particle abrasion then.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if you're just luting it, of course, you don't need to bond it, so you don't need to use air particle abrasion. But if you're bonding zirconia, which we know, certainly you can predictably bond zirconia. I hope that's not necessarily even a question anymore. If you're bonding zirconia, then you do need to use air particle abrasion. You need to do it not only to create micromechanical retention so you can bond to it, but also to clean it. Like salivary proteins have a high affinity for zirconia, more so than even just glassy ceramics. So it's important that if you're trying in the mouth and then you're going to bond it, that you're cleaning it. There's multiple ways you can clean it. You can use an etch. You can even use hydrofluoric acid etch or phosphoric acid etch. Believe it or not, you can theoretically etch zirconia with acid, but that's not the most efficient way to do it. But you can use that to clean it off. But air particle abrasion, T.C.R. Silliman's lab and UNC, I know you guys are in North Carolina, he's shown that that's the most efficient way to clean it. And you as a dentist need to be the one cleaning it, because you're going to lose that effect if you don't do it immediately. If you're having your lab tech doing it, you're not going to get the same cleansability.
Yeah, and I'd take it one step further, and I would say that, this dentist also said, I lute everything. You can't lute every single zirconia restoration. You can't. But the flip side is, okay, now with some of the newer resin modified glass ionomers, yes, you will get wettability of the zirconia, and you will get more wettability if you do have the micromechanical retention. However, it's just a good habit. If you're whether you're luting or bonding, is it gonna hurt anything to air abrade it if you're luting?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
Is it gonna potentially help? Yeah. But it's not this dentist trying to complicate things.
It's not, but I think the other part that Melissa mentioned is, we're completely ignoring the whole cleansing process. Like, that is probably the most important thing that we get with air abrasion. You're going to have to go through some process to cleanse the prep, to cleanse the restoration. You've got to do that. I don't care what you do to do that, but you've got to do that. So why not do something that also adds micromechanical retention at the same time? I mean,
yeah. I guess
I was kind of dumbfounded by the comment, and I'm not knocking this dentist in any ways. I don't even know who the hell it was, but it was just like, really? Okay. Let's try and find the most professional way to respond or reply to this. And, I guess
it's not about knocking anybody down, but it's about getting people to kind of see that this is not just about, okay, the science says X, which that's important, but there is this whole concept of what salivary contamination does to all of us, and you've got to cleanse somehow. You've got to cleanse, like, period. We know that. So I mean, I guess there's just got to be a way to say that without offending people.
Hey, what else? You mentioned Taysir's study, and I think it was with Nate Lawson, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't it that bleach was extremely effective as well in removing the contaminants?
And so there's something you touched on that I want to talk about in a second, but if I'm not mistaken, you can use bleach, but I don't think it's necessarily extremely effective. It seems to me that air particle abrasion is really head and shoulders above any other method for cleaning, and it's easy to do. It's relatively inexpensive. But you talked about what that dentist said, where they're only luting things, and there's a really cool paradigm shift going on in dentistry. by virtue of adhesive dentistry. And I know Jennifer's kind of seen some of this as well, where we're really realizing we can very predictably bond with glassy ceramics, for example. And so we don't necessarily have to be thinking so much about mechanical retention. And if we're not thinking so much about mechanical retention, we can conserve far more tooth structure, and we open ourselves up to so many more restorative options where perhaps we only need to do an onlay to replace a single cusp rather than doing a whole crown. So I guess I'm just a little discouraged to hear that people are only opting to loot.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that unfortunately just don't understand, or not necessarily that they can't understand, they just don't care to take the time to understand the bonding protocol or the new adhesives. And we've also got some incredible cements out there right now that are both adhesive and self-adhesive. And there's a couple companies that are making them that are just fantastic, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of options in adhesive dentistry that have come to light as of late.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so as a doctor who didn't do onlays or inlays for a really long time because the temporization always really sucked, like as we move more towards same day milling and or hopefully 3D printing gets to the same like level as well, then not having to worry about the temporization piece of it and how you manage that, and can it predictably be lightly stuck in there just to hold long enough until you can get the restoration back from the lab, really opens up again the opportunity for more conservative dentistry to be able to say, well, because I have the access and capability, I can be very conservative because I don't have to manage, trying to hold it in a temporary position for some period of time till I can actually adhesively bond the final restoration that will work really well in this particular scenario. So I think all the digital dentistry evolution and where we're moving with both material science and with the technology kind of coming together means hopefully more conservative, predictable outcomes for patients long-term, which that's the win, right?
You know what? I see this though, as there are a lot of people who have fought these battles before us, right? So there are two things that will teach you the lessons of dentistry, and one is either going to be time spent in practice, and the other is going to be data, right? There are those two things. So you have the people that say, if you don't have 4 millimeters of axial wall height, you probably ought to think about bonding the darn thing, because the likelihood is it's not going to be there in 5 years if you don't bond it. Or you can be in practice for 5 years and watch it debond and make note of it. So one of those two things is going to catch up with you. So to not pay attention to the data that other people have gathered and put together to say, look, you don't have 4 millimeters of opposite axial wall height, bond the darn thing. And you better be good at bonding if you're going to do that. You got to follow one or the other. Either if you don't have 5 years in practice, I'd follow the data.
Yeah.
That's fewer. That's honestly, what is the thing that disrupts us the most in practice? Are emergencies. Where do emergencies come from? They come from lost crowns, lost temporaries. That's 90% of what we do is fixing that kind of stuff. So you can either learn it by following the data, or you can just wait and experience it yourself and go, hey, you know what? Melissa was right. Maybe I should have particle abraded intaglio surface. Just my opinion.
And there is another consideration as well when we're talking about the beauty of bonding. It's like, yes, you have an opportunity to save more tooth structure, but also, especially if you're thinking of a glassy ceramic, like think of the tile on your floor. It's, I think we take for granted that bathroom tile, we can walk all over it. Sometimes we drop things on it and it doesn't even crack. I mean, seriously, a 200-pound person can walk on this ceramic in their bathroom floor, and we take that for granted. And why are we able to do that? Because it's in compression, and it's being reinforced by the foundation effectively. And when we bond for certain glassy ceramics, for example, we can actually do less reduction. So for example, Emax by Ivoclar, you can go from a 1.5 to 1 millimeter reduction because it's bonded, so it's reinforced. So on multiple accounts, you can perhaps prevent fewer walk-ins because it's predictably bonded, but also you can be more conservative on multiple dimensions.
So let's talk about your podcast. So you're sitting in your little office at the Air Force and you're like, you know what? I don't have enough things to do today. I think I'll start a podcast. And then off you went. Tell me how that came about.
Okay. So here's the real story. So my husband, he is finishing up his residency in anesthesia here at UT San Antonio. He's been doing this for 5 years. Because I'm in the Air Force, we were geographically separated for 3 years. I was at Barksdale Air Force Base and then Goodfellow Air Force Base. Sometimes that just happens. Certainly no one's fault. But so we would travel to see each other every weekend. Each weekend we take turns who was driving. For 1 year, it was a 7-hour drive from Louisiana to San Antonio. And I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I was a recent dental school grad. And, I'm sure you guys can relate to this pain. There's such a void between what you really were taught in dental school and what you really need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a lot of cell phone service, so I couldn't really pull up YouTube. And there were there's really exceptional, phenomenal dental podcasts out there about practice management, but I needed something that would catch me up. And then I think I have an entrepreneurial spirit. And I was like, I think there's a void and I want to fill that void. And initially the podcast was so bad initially. That's how everything starts. It was so bad. I mean, the first 10 episodes, oh my gosh, I had no idea how to do it. I was anonymous. I didn't say who I was because I was like, if this thing flops, I don't want anyone to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, the guests were great. I am so grateful at the generosity of some of these really esteemed university professors that were willing to take a chance on me. But so that's really kind of the genesis. And I think the biggest thing is maybe for any endeavor, it's kind of just sticking with it, that you don't want to do it, but you do it anyway. And it
That's
pays.
right. Well, they say the first version of anything that you invent or create should embarrass you at some point, then you're actually onto something and you'll be forced to sort of evolve it. And in the software industry, and that's what my husband's in, for those entrepreneurs who are creating some type of new software, they say that first version of what you invented should be embarrassing to you at some point, but
True.
you had to start somewhere and get it to market and start to see where the holes are and, all that good stuff.
Isn't that true of every passion in life, though?
Absolutely.
You look at something that you decided to take on.
Yeah.
And, the simplest analogy I can give is when I started riding and racing bicycles. I mean, I was like, I'm going to do this. And I looked at myself when I first started versus before I quit. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was embarrassing. But there's so many things that you become passionate about in life. And the first version embarrasses you. The first version of this embarrasses me. I mean, look at how stupid Jeff looked when we started this.
Exactly.
I mean,
The only thing that brought this together was Jennifer.
Has that improved? I don't. No, I mean,
Really?
we'll just reflect like our first. We'll just compare the first 10 episodes. So we were doing a different platform at the time. So we made people get on 30 to 45 minutes early because we had no idea if it was going to work.
Yeah.
And I would say 75% of the time it did not. So we had one guest who was on an iPad that Chad was holding up.
Oh my God.
So that we could see him because his connectivity wouldn't get onto the platform because he happened to be in Congress and they had all these firewalls and stuff. So the whole episode is Chad's 2 fingers holding the iPad so that we could talk to the guests and then wait for it to get through with it was. And then we had the Blair Witch Project, which Susan Dunn is an awesome guest.
That is the one that stands out in my memory more than anything we have ever done. At the end of all of this, that is the broadcast that I will remember is the flickering lights. And
there was something wrong with her video, or it could have been the platform. Again, the platform really sucked at the time. That it was like so first off, her video is all black and white for whatever reason. And then it was like flashing bulbs on her face constantly. So it really looked like the Blair Witch Project. Like she had it was such a disaster. Then the information was really good, but it was such a disaster.
And by the way,
there was no information to be received because it was completely overshadowed.
Right.
By the way, Melissa, your stuff is top notch right now. I just want you to know you have nothing to be embarrassed about because I haven't seen your first few episodes. But
because I deleted them because they were deleted. That's why you never.
Yeah, ours are still branded somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with live. So we take a big chance every time we turn it on live to say, well, it is what it is. And, you know, sometimes it's gone really, really well. And other times it's a little clunky.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, besides biomaterials, what else? I mean, digital is a hot topic in dentistry. I want to know what you all are able to do digitally in the Air Force. I mean, where does the military stand on digital dentistry at this point in time?
Yeah. Well, by the way, in June, I'm doing a presentation for the Seattle Study Club. It's a webinar, so I think it's accessible to all on digital workflows with implant planning. So I can't really speak to the military. I want to be careful about that, not necessarily making any assumptions about what they're doing. But I can tell you.
How did they shoot down that balloon?
Yeah, like as if I have really any idea what's going on.
Right.
Bunker,
you were probably right in the middle of that. So
me? No, I live in such a bunker. Especially I'm terrible when it comes to current events. My husband has to tell me what's going on in the world. So digital. So this is kind of neat though. I personally really enjoy using exocad, which is an open architecture software. A lot of capabilities, a lot of applications. I think it's a lot of fun to tinker in. I think especially if you're at a point in your career where you're like, I'm a little burnt out. By the way, none of this is sponsored by exocad, right? It sounds like this is a paid promotion. But if you're like, hey, I'm burnt out in my career, I want something to ignite my passion, my interest. I think really tinkering in digital dentistry is a lot of fun. So pretty much effectively for all my cases, I am digitally scanning them. I'm digitally designing them. I do a fair bit of pretty complex cases. And so those kind of cases, as you guys know, fall apart at the seams if you don't have a very predictable plan. So you can do kind of a traditional treatment plan where, you're evaluating these casts, you're kind of making best assumptions of how everything's going to unfold. But that can be unpredictable. And you guys are very well-established clinicians in private practice, so you're probably way better at treatment planning than I am. But I do like to digitally design everything through exocad. And I find that when I digitally design it and I put the teeth in space where they're supposed to go, then I can make a really complex treatment plan from there where it becomes very predictable. And the treatment plan falls like a domino. So an example of that perhaps is I do place a decent bit of implants, and sometimes I get referrals from clinicians, and some of them are cases that are so complex. Like this patient is going to require a lateral window sinus lift, some vertical ridge augmentation, and that's going to take about a year and a half before we're ever going to get to the point of an implant. But through digitally designing it, I can very predictably kind of predict how the treatment plan is going to go. So that's a lot of fun. I'm weird. It's what I do in my free time. Like weekends, I enjoy it.
So tell me, because we had Diana on not that long ago, and she's, she's huge in exocad and really bringing the educational platform to the GP so that they can become competent in exocad. I also use exocad, and I think she and I had similar challenges. Tell us about your onboarding experience. Like, are you self-taught? Did you have a trainer? Did you watch a bunch of YouTube videos? Because it seems to be kind of a consistent challenge, is just to help our audience understand what it actually looks like to bring exocad into their practice and to onboard it the way you want to be able to use it.
Yeah. So admittedly, that is absolutely the hardest, steepest curve. It is such a steep learning curve. And I will admit, it started out as a German software. And so there's just things in there that are not intuitive to Americans. So for example, the opposite cast, the opposing cast, they call the antagonist.
Yeah.
It's these little nuances. Yeah. So I am very fortunate. I had a really great mentor. He's a board certified prosthodontist. His name is Joshua Vest. I am forever indebted to him. And he, for a year, sat with me and he kind of really ran me through exocad and gave the clinical perspective. So I'll admit I'm very privileged and blessed to kind of have a mentor like that. But don't despair. YouTube is phenomenal. There is so much you can just learn through YouTube. Yeah, you really can. And don't be afraid. Like it's really a great option. There's also Imagine, who that's really the distributor I got exocad through, because exocad themselves, they don't sign it, they go through a distributor. Imagine, I love their customer service was just next level, and they have so many courses you can take.
Oh, that's great to know, because I had no idea. I mean, that wasn't how it was I
Yeah.
was presented exocad through my Patterson rep because, like you said, they go through different dealers and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's excellent information for folks that are looking to bring it on, that there's avenues in which there might be some support for them when they want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, how did you learn it then? I'm always curious to see how other people learn it.
So I did get access to a trainer, but again, they're used to teaching lab technicians. And so there was a bit of a disconnect. And so I've used a lot of YouTube and just goofing around in it for making mistakes and learning as I go, and trying to push the envelope a little bit. But it's a lot of trial and error, and then reaching out to people who I know are using it and asking them, or again, going back to YouTube to find the answer.
Yeah.
So, but I do love it. And I will tell you, it makes you a better dentist when you, so I would say it's akin to like when the analog techniques were really prevalent and they were waxing and setting their own teeth, casting their own crowns, and doing a bunch of the old techniques there. But what was really happening was a very intimate knowledge of the oral cavity and the structure and how things sort of related to one another, and reductions of preps and all that kind of stuff. And for sure, that's been a missing piece in my knowledge base for a really long time, because I'm sort of stuck in that era where I was the last gen of classes probably setting their own denture teeth and like kind of moving out of the analog world. And then, as the digital space was getting a really strong foothold, so a lot of those concepts were frankly lost on me from dental school. So exocad's actually been a pretty cool connection piece for me to see the 3-dimensional, what the lab sees when they get my stuff, or what they understand about the prep design, or how much reduction I need for a veneer long before I ever give them the prep. So definitely makes you a better, when you sit down, you kind of know, to your point, you've already pre-planned what your failures are likely going to be. Not that they don't come, but it's more like what Chad was dealing with, where it's access issues or breathing through your nose, or, like it's not as much as frequently the dentistry itself. It's all the things that the tooth is wrapped around.
I'm going to put this patient in your chair tomorrow, and I'm going to let you exocad the crap out of that and tell me how it works. Tell me if it makes life any better tomorrow.
I don't think it will.
Yeah. You just go for it. Let me know.
That's what I'm saying. exocad doesn't solve any of those problems.
I'm teasing you. No. And that's one of the things.
Unless you could 3D design something to open their nose up so that they could actually breathe through it.
Actually, that is kind of cool, because this mentor of mine, Joshua Vess, he went on to greener pastures and became a, you're going to have to forgive me, why is it evading me? It's the prosthodontist that now kind of deals with the face. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Maxillofacial prosthetics?
He went on a maxillofacial pros, and he really brought that technology and understanding. And so he actually makes a lot of facial prostheses. Is that the plural, prosthesis?
Yeah,
and a lot of it he designs through exocad digitally. So it's not outside the realm of possibilities we could do.
It's a breathe right strip just internally for a dental procedure. That's not to have a market share. I think we just invented something. Cut tape. We're gonna have to put this under an NDA.
Sir, I'm gonna shove these up your nose.
Dilator though, can't you buy those on Amazon? Okay.
If you put the word dental on it, you can charge 50% more, and you can go to the trade shows.
You can brand it. Exactly.
Right.
Or I'm going to inject you with a bunch of propofol, get you to shut the F up, and we're going to get this done.
Yeah.
That's the alternative.
Yeah.
We're looking for the less invasive option.
Well, tell us, since we're running out of time, but tell us where we can find you. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, and I know that you offer CE through your podcast. Is that correct? Tell us where we can find that. I'm going to post it in the comments.
You're so kind. So the podcast is on all major It's on all major podcast platforms. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, iHeartRadio, you name it. Dental Digest podcast. And so honestly, I probably feel like I left more questions than answers about maybe zirconia or really adhesive dentistry. So you can always my Instagram is Dr.Melissa Seibert. Or you can Dental Digest podcast that Instagram too. yeah, got some exciting upcoming lectures. I typically post about it on Instagram, so feel free to come out to those if you can. Yeah, thanks.
Well, I love that you're involved with Seattle Study Club. That's very, very near and dear to me. So I awesome that you're involved with that. Love that you're serving our country. Love what you're doing. I love to see. I'm going to go ahead and say it because I guarantee you I'm probably 20 years your elder. Jeff might be 35. But I love to see a passionate young dentist at work that loves education and is promoting education, because I guarantee you at your age, I was not as looking as forward to education as you are. So kudos to you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that your words as a young dentist were mad respect a few months ago. And we're just going to throw that back at you. Mad respect for what you're doing.
I am so sorry, because earlier I said Seibert and it is Seibert. So
you're fine. Everyone says Seibert. It's my husband's last name. I wish they would just go with Seibert because that's easier for everybody.
No, I had you down as Seibert. I went to dental school with a Seibert, so I was with you the whole time. Yeah.
You got something on your nose, Jen.
I think it's on the screen. Oh. You know what's funny is there's a speck on my screen, and I just told you I think it's on the screen because I totally saw it. I was thinking the same thing.
You know what? It's a large landing area. So if something's going to land on the screen, it's probably going to be somewhere in that general vicinity. So
you don't have to worry about a Duplantis being able to breathe through their nose. All right.
Yeah. Or a Horowitz.
Yeah, there you go, brother. Cheers, man. So,
cheers to you all. Melissa, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Right.
We'd love to have you back. And I was posting that stuff and something happened with Facebook, so I'm going to have to do it in just a minute. But Dental Digest podcast and at Dr.Melissa Seibert.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I will get that on there in just a second, but thank you so much.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Have a good one. And you know what? Keep trucking in the world of dental education.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.